You crack an egg into a pan of boiling water on a Sunday morning, hoping for something gentle and round like the pictures show, and instead you get a cloud of white ribbons spreading across the surface, a yolk that breaks before it even settles, and a smell of vinegar that nobody in the family asked for. The water looks like a storm. Your husband walks in, looks at the pan, and walks back out without saying anything. The kids are at the table waiting, and what lands on their plates is a gray, stringy mess that used to be an egg. You scrape it into the bin, crack another one, and the second try is no better. By the third egg, you have given up, and breakfast becomes fried eggs again. The same as always, because at least fried eggs do not betray you. My name is Elias Yoder. I live a quiet life on a small farm in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania, and in our house, eggs are not something we think about much, until somebody tries to poach one and it goes wrong. My wife Anna had that same morning more times than she would like to admit, back before she learned the way her own mother used to do it, without vinegar, without swirling whirlpools, without timers buzzing on a phone. By the end of this video, you will know exactly how to pick the right egg, how to prepare the water, how to lower the egg in without breaking it, how long to wait, and how to tell, just by looking, when it is done. No special tools, no gadgets, just a pot, some water, and a method that families used long before non-stick pans and silicone egg poachers existed. In the old days, breakfast was not something you experimented with. Families were large, mornings were short, and there was work waiting outside before the sun was even fully up. A wasted egg was not just a wasted egg. It was wasted time, wasted food, and sometimes a child going to the field with less in his stomach than he should have had. So the methods that survived were the ones that worked every single time, with ingredients people already had, and without anything that could go wrong in a rush. Poaching an egg the old way was never about making it look fancy. It was about making it reliable. A good poached egg, done simply, gave you a soft center, a set white, and almost no mess in the pan afterward. That mattered when you had 6 more eggs to cook and 4 more children to feed. So let's start with the part most people skip entirely, the egg itself. Start here. Not every egg poaches the same way, and the egg you pick decides more of the outcome than anything you do with the water. A fresh egg holds itself together. The white is thick and clings close to the yolk. An older egg has a thin, watery white that spreads out the moment it touches hot water, and that is exactly the cloud of ribbons you saw in your own pan. If you have ever wondered why some mornings your poached egg comes out neat and other mornings it falls apart, the answer was very likely sitting in the egg carton before you ever touched the stove. You can test this without cracking anything. Take an egg and place it gently in a bowl of cool water. A fresh egg will lie flat on its side at the bottom. An egg that is a week or 2 old will tilt slightly, standing more upright, because the air pocket inside has grown larger as the egg has aged. An egg that floats to the top is one you should not poach, and honestly, one you should think twice about eating at all. This is the step that decides whether your egg holds its shape or turns into soup. If you only remember one thing from the beginning of this video, remember that a fresh egg is your foundation. Everything else, the water, the timing, the technique, works far better when the egg itself is cooperating with you instead of falling apart in your hands. Now, for the water, and here is where I want to clear something up, because a lot of people have been told that vinegar is the secret. In some kitchens, a small splash of vinegar is added to help the white firm up faster. It is not wrong exactly, but it is also not the old way, and it leaves a taste that lingers if you use too much. In a simple household, what mattered more than vinegar was the temperature of the water and how still it was kept. Fill a pot with water, enough that the egg will be fully covered, about 2 to 3 inches deep, and bring it to a gentle simmer, not a hard boil. This is the part most people get wrong. A hard, rolling boil throws the egg around, tears the white into pieces, and cooks the outside too fast while the inside stays cold. A gentle simmer, the kind where small bubbles rise slowly from the bottom, but the surface stays mostly calm, gives the egg a steady, even heat without violence. Here is where your hands matter. Crack the egg into a small cup or bowl first, not directly into the pot. This single step solves more poaching disasters than almost anything else. When you crack an egg straight into water, you have no control over how it enters. It might hit at an angle, break apart on impact, or spread before it has a chance to set. When you crack it into a cup first, you can look at it, check that the yolk is whole, and then lower it into the water gently, close to the surface, so it slips in rather than drops in. Anna always says this is the part that separates a calm breakfast from a frustrated one. She would crack the egg into a small white cup, hold the cup close to the simmering water, almost touching the surface, and tip it slowly. The egg would slide in like it was being poured rather than dropped, and the white would wrap around the yolk instead of scattering away from it. Some old kitchens used a slotted spoon to create a gentle swirl in the water before lowering the egg, the idea being that the slow-moving water would help the white curl inward around the yolk, rather than drifting outward. You do not need to overdo this. A light, slow stir with a spoon, just enough to move the water without creating a whirlpool, is enough. The water does not need to be spinning like a storm. It needs to be moving just enough to encourage the white to gather close. Once the egg is in the water, here is where most people make the mistake. They walk away, or they start stirring again, or they poke at it to see if it is done. Leave it alone. The egg needs those first 30 seconds to begin setting on the outside. If you disturb it too soon, the white that has not yet firmed up will tear away and float off as those white ribbons you saw before. For a soft, poached egg with a runny yolk and a fully set white, 3 to 4 minutes in gently simmering water is usually enough. For a slightly firmer yolk, closer to 4.5 minutes. This will vary a little depending on the size of the egg and how cold it was when it went into the water, which is another reason letting eggs come closer to room temperature before cooking, even just for 10 or 15 minutes on the counter, can make a noticeable difference. A very cold egg dropped into hot water needs more time for the center to catch up, and in that extra time, the outside can overcook. So far, we have done 3 things. We chose a fresh egg by testing it in water. We kept the simmer gentle instead of letting it boil hard, and we cracked the egg into a cup before lowering it in slowly. Those 3 steps alone solve most of the problems people run into. The cloudy water, the broken yolk, the scattered white. Everything else from here is about timing and checking. Now, how do you know when it is done without cutting it open and ruining it? This is where old kitchens relied on something simple: touch and movement, not timers. A poached egg that is done will have a white that is fully opaque, no clear or translucent patches left, and it will hold together as one piece when you gently lift it with a slotted spoon. If you nudge it lightly with the spoon, and the whole egg moves as a unit, with the white wrapped firmly around the yolk, it is ready. If parts of the white are still loose or jiggling separately from the rest, give it another 30 seconds. For the yolk, you can press very gently on the top of the egg with the back of a spoon. A soft, poached egg will give slightly, with a little spring back, the way a ripe tomato gives under gentle pressure. If it feels completely firm with no give at all, the yolk has likely cooked through, which is not a failure. Some people prefer that. But it is good to know which one you are aiming for, so you are not surprised. A careful kitchen does not rush this step. Pulling the egg out too early, before the white has fully set, means it will continue to look unfinished even after you take it out, because the heat inside the pot was doing work that has not been completed yet. Pulling it out too late means the yolk firms up more than you wanted, and there is no way to undo that once it has happened. Once the egg is ready, lift it out carefully with a slotted spoon, letting the extra water drain off for a second or two before you set it down. This matters more than people think. An egg lifted straight from the water onto toast or a plate brings a small puddle of hot water with it, which can make bread soggy and dilute any seasoning you add afterward. A few seconds of draining on the spoon, sometimes resting briefly on a folded cloth or paper towel, keeps everything tidier. The part most people throw away is the part old kitchens paid attention to. And here, I do not mean a part of the egg, but a part of the process. The water you cooked the egg in is not waste. If you are making more than one egg, that same simmering water, with maybe a tiny amount of loose white skimmed off the surface between eggs, can be used again for the next one. There is no need to dump it out and start fresh each time, which not only wastes water, but also means waiting for a new pot to come up to temperature. If you are cooking for a full family, this becomes important. Crack each egg into its own small cup first, even if you are doing 4 or 5 in a row. Lower them into the water one at a time, giving each a little space so they are not touching each other, which can cause the whites to merge together at the edges. With a pot of reasonable size, 3 or 4 eggs can poach at once without crowding, as long as you are not trying to fit too many into too little water. Let me pause here for a small story, because this is the kind of thing that gets lost if nobody says it out loud. Anna's grandmother used to poach eggs for a household of 9, her husband, her children, and whoever else happened to be at the table that morning, which in farm communities was not unusual. She did not have a timer. She did not have a thermometer. What she had was a sense, built over years, of what the water should look like, what the egg should look like floating in it, and how it should move when you touched it with a spoon. She would crack an egg into a cup, lower it in, and while it cooked, she would already be cracking the next one. By the time the 3rd egg went in, the first was usually ready to come out. There was a rhythm to it, not rushed, but steady, like the rest of the morning. That rhythm is something you build with a little practice, not something you get right the very first time. And that is fine. The first egg you poach this way might still come out a little messier than you hoped. The second will be better. By the 4th or 5th, your hands will start to know what to do before your mind catches up. When to lower the cup, how close to the water to hold it, how gently to let it slide. Now, there is a question that comes up often, and it is worth answering honestly. Can you poach an egg ahead of time and keep it warm for later? In some kitchens, especially when feeding a crowd, poached eggs were cooked slightly under, closer to 2.5 or 3 minutes, then lifted out and set into a bowl of warm, not hot, water until everyone was ready to eat. This kept the egg from overcooking while it waited, and a brief moment back in hot water just before serving brought it fully up to temperature. This is not about saving food that has already gone bad. It is about managing timing when you are cooking for more people than fit comfortably around one stove at one time. What you should not do is poach an egg and then let it sit at room temperature for a long stretch, or refrigerate it and reheat it hours later, expecting the same texture. Eggs are forgiving in many ways, but a poached egg loses its character quickly once it cools. The white can take on a slightly rubbery texture, and the yolk, if it was soft, will not return to that same softness after reheating. If a poached egg sits out for more than a short while, or if it develops an off smell or an unusual gray-green tint around the yolk after sitting, it is better left uneaten. These are signs worth knowing, not to frighten you, but because a careful kitchen pays attention to small things like this without making a big production of it. Let's talk for a moment about what to do with the egg once it is on the plate, because even a perfectly poached egg can be let down by what surrounds it. In many old rural homes, a poached egg was served simply on a slice of bread that had been lightly toasted over the stove, sometimes with a little butter melted into it while still warm, so the butter would soak slightly into the bread before the egg ever touched it. A small amount of salt and pepper added right at the table, not before, so the seasoning stayed where it landed instead of dissolving into the egg during cooking. Some families added a little fresh herb if it was growing nearby, chives if they had them in the garden, or a bit of parsley. Nothing elaborate. The point was never to dress the egg up. The point was that the egg itself, done properly, did not need much dressing up to begin with. A soft yolk breaking slowly over warm toast, a little salt, maybe a little pepper. That was breakfast, and it was enough. There is one more detail that often gets overlooked, and it has to do with the size of the pot and the depth of the water. If the water is too shallow, the egg will not be fully submerged, and the top of the egg, wherever it sits above the water line, will cook more slowly than the rest, leaving an uneven result where the bottom is set and the top is still loose. A depth of at least 2 to 3 inches of water gives the egg room to be surrounded on all sides, cooking evenly from every direction. At the same time, a pot that is too wide and too full of water for the number of eggs you are cooking means more energy spent heating water you do not need, and a larger surface area where the water can lose its gentle simmer and either go cold in spots or boil too hard in others. A medium-sized pot, with enough water to cover the eggs by an inch or so above their tops, is usually the right balance for 2 to 4 eggs at a time. So far, we have done 3 things at the start: chosen a fresh egg, kept the water at a gentle simmer, and cracked the egg into a cup before lowering it slowly. And since then, we have added the timing, the way to check for doneness without cutting the egg open, the importance of draining before serving, and how to manage cooking more than 1 egg at a time without losing track of any of them. Put together, these are not complicated steps. None of them require anything you do not already have in your kitchen. What they require is attention. Paying attention to the egg before it goes in the water. Paying attention to the water while the egg cooks. And paying attention to the egg as it comes out. This is where the old method becomes practical, because it does not ask you to buy anything new or learn anything complicated. It asks you to slow down for about 4 minutes, and to actually look at what is happening in the pot instead of walking away and hoping for the best. I think about Anna's first attempts at this, years ago now, before we were married, when she was cooking breakfast for her own family on a morning when her mother was unwell. She told me later that her first egg came apart almost completely, strands of white floating everywhere, the yolk sinking to the bottom of the pot on its own. She almost gave up and just scrambled the rest of the eggs instead. But her mother, from the next room, asked her one question. Was the water boiling hard, or was it gentle? Anna admitted it had been boiling hard. Her mother told her to turn it down, wait a minute for it to settle, and try again, cracking the egg into a cup first this time. The second egg came out almost whole. Not perfect, a few small wisps of white had still drifted off, but recognizable, soft, with a yolk that held its shape. By the fourth egg, it looked like something you would be glad to put in front of someone. That is really the heart of this whole method. It is not magic, and it is not a secret ingredient. It is simply observation, patience, and paying attention to a few details that, once you know them, become second nature. A fresh egg, a gentle simmer, a cup instead of a direct crack, a little patience for those first 30 seconds, a gentle check near the end instead of a guess. None of these things take more time than what you are already spending standing at the stove in the morning. They just ask you to spend that time a little more carefully. Before we wrap up, I want to mention one more small thing, because it comes up in almost every kitchen sooner or later. What to do if your first egg of the morning does not go well, even after all of this? Sometimes the water was hotter than it looked. Sometimes the egg was older than you thought, even after the float test. Sometimes your hand was not quite steady when you tipped the cup. This happens even in kitchens that have been poaching eggs for decades. The old way of handling this was simple. You do not throw out the rest of your plans because of one egg. You skim out what you can of the first one, adjust the heat if it needed adjusting, and you try again with the next egg. The pot does not need to be emptied and refilled. The water doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs a small correction, and then you carry on. This is, in many ways, the whole spirit of an old-fashioned kitchen. Things did not always go right the first time, and nobody expected them to. What mattered was noticing what went wrong, making a small adjustment, and continuing on without making a big event out of it. A burned edge on toast got scraped off, not thrown away. A slightly overcooked egg still got eaten, just maybe with a little more salt. The goal was never perfection on the first try. The goal was a good, simple breakfast on the table, made with care, without waste, and without drama. So if you have struggled with poached eggs before, if your kitchen has seen its share of cloudy water and scattered whites, I hope what we have walked through here gives you something to try differently next time. Start with a fresh egg. Test it in a bowl of water. Bring your water to a gentle simmer, not a hard boil. Crack the egg into a small cup and lower it in close to the surface, letting it slide rather than drop. Give it those first 30 seconds without disturbing it. Check for doneness by gently nudging it and pressing lightly on the yolk. Drain it for a moment before serving, on warm toast with a little butter, salt, and pepper. The old kitchen was not smarter because it had fancy tools or precise instruments. It was smarter because it paid attention to small things: the look of an egg in water, the sound of a simmer versus a boil, the feel of a yolk under the back of a spoon. Those small bits of attention, passed down without much fuss from one cook to the next, are still just as useful today as they were when Anna's grandmother was cooking breakfast for 9 people with nothing but a stove, a pot, and years of quiet practice. Tell me in the comments, has a poached egg ever gone wrong for you, and what happened? Was it the water, the egg, or something else entirely? And if someone in your family, a mother, a grandmother, an aunt, had their own way of doing this, write it down here. These small kitchen habits do not get written in books very often, and they disappear quietly if nobody passes them along. Next time, I want to show you the old way of keeping a cast iron pan so that eggs never stick to it in the first place, no matter how old the pan is, and why one wrong wash with the wrong soap can undo years of careful seasoning in a single morning.